Okay, so here is part two of how the same narcissist messed up both of my marriages, which is probably giving him too much credit because both marriages were really built on a house of cards. And again, I'm not trying to make excuses for the part that I played in any of this. The bottom line is that I felt stuck and unhappy with both spouses. And there has been so much learned helplessness, like shoved and grinded in my face over the years, that I do not have the financial or psychological means to really break free by myself, if that makes sense. I mean, literally, my second husband has had me convinced for about 15 years now that I can't even cook an egg for myself because I am so worthless and helpless and mess everything up so badly that I will supposedly pass out over the stove if I try to use it. So the level of, like I said, learned helplessness where you have been told your whole life over and over again that you can't do this right, you can't do that right, so you just kind of stop trying. You believe it. And even starting back with my mother, my entire life, I have had all these learned helplessness issues just pushed on me that I can't do this, I can't survive without that, I can never take care of myself, I'm just starting to really unravel and understand how that was manipulative and controlling and damaged me, and it's not even true. So it's not that I had these two idealistic marriages and some third party came in and broke this solid foundation, because you can't come in and break a solid foundation. But all of the issues that I really didn't even know I had until just very recently, like within the last year or two, made me very, very susceptible to be fed off of by a narcissist. And again, full disclosure, I do have this all written out. I am reading it off of my computer screen because I don't want to ramble and go in circles. I want to stay focused. So after all the dust settled from my first divorce, I ended up being in such an insecure state that I fell into another relationship really quickly. Big surprise. I just felt like I needed to have wounds patched up to feel like a valued human being again. And I had run across an ex of mine that was just suddenly like, oh, let me shower you with attention. Like, look, I just broke up with my girlfriend to come and pay attention to you. And he told me all these beautiful things, like you were the one that got away and I've always thought about you. And when you keep walking into narcissists and you don't realize like that's who they are, because I always thought a narcissist was somebody who looks at themselves in the mirror and just so in love with themselves. But no, like narcissists are like energy vampires for empathic people. And a lot of times they don't even like themselves. So that's why they have to whip you up to sort of be in line behind them. But when you have a narcissistic parent and then you end up dating one narcissist after another, I mean, you really aren't questioning that this isn't normal. That's just how love looks to you. And so when you're in that first phase of a narcissist and they lay their sights on you and you're hearing all of these wonderful things and it's just all about how special you are and how much you've been missed since you were away, you really start to believe that maybe you are a little piece of magic. Because that's kind of the point of a narcissist, is that they feed into your ego so that you will turn around and feed into theirs. And then like once you get that sort of attachment link bond, then they just start sucking everything out of you. But this old flame and I, we reconnected, and that was at the end of October. We were married on Valentine's Day that next February, and we had a baby in November of that year, almost exactly 9 months to the day later. Looking back, it was way too fast. Like I should have never been on board with any of that. But again, when you're going from one narcissist to another, that looks normal to you. And I had no idea what a narcissist actually was. I had no clue what I was dealing with. It just seems like this is what normal is because that was the small sample size that I had to judge a guy's behavior by. And, at this point, I'm 22 years old. I'm getting married for the second time, and my brain still hasn't even developed the capacity to look around corners. So here I am, not really able to look at things as a long, big picture kind of scale yet, and I'm just desperately trying to do the next right thing for my own survival at that point. And my second husband's gaze for me, which had been really not as intense as Joe's, but still very much, I want to be with you all the time. I want to fill you with compliments. Oh man, I missed you so much. I can't stand when you're away. And that all cooled pretty much the minute I got knocked up. Like, I was wearing his ring. I was pregnant with his baby. I had, an ex-husband who was fairly dangerous and no job or means to support myself. So pretty much my second husband knew that his effort for me could stop at that moment. And there have been many unkind times with my second husband and issues with his infidelity and him constantly rebelling against me like a teenager to his mother, or trying to shut me down whenever I gained any kind of financial independence. And I am not a perfect little princess who just sits back silently and lets it happen. I mean, I grinded my heels and I argue and I'm going to make you listen and understand and care and empathize and do all these things that over the years, I have come to accept that he's just not emotionally capable of doing. But I've only come up with this understanding over the past maybe 4 or 5 years, because we're coming up on 15 years of being married, and I feel like I have never had a committed partner, and I have spent years wondering what I keep doing wrong to make people fall out of love with me. Because I did not understand my partner's mental health or my own painful issues that were just leading me to these kind of people. All I knew is that love was supposed to be simple, and it really sucked the life out of me until I shut down. Then came 2021, and my Facebook notifies me of a friend request from none other than good old Joe. And if you didn't see my part 1, Joe popped up during my first marriage and convinced me to run away with him, only to change his mind, basically the minute I came running. So I was really apprehensive about seeing his friend's request, but also kind of curious, because I wasn't really mad at him anymore. It was something that happened and it sucked. But being mad at him only impacted me. My hate for him did not hurt him. So I let it go for the most part. So I accept the friend's request, and he starts sending me messages through Facebook shortly after that. And this time, I was well-versed in Narcissist and their tactics. So talking to him, it was almost like a game for me, because I could see what he was doing now and understand a lot better that it had nothing to do with me. And I got the feeling that he was lonely and kind of up to something when he was messaging me. So any kind of hint of a romantic comment was just met with plain old rejection by me. I mean, I used vomit emojis when he said something that was kind of like, oh, hey, you're so sexy, or I'm so sexy, or whatever. I laughed and made fun of him. I was even quoting the Repeat Stuff song from, I think, Bo Burnham, and he would try to compliment me, and I'd be like, oh, I love your hands because your fingerprints are like no other. I love your eyes and their bluish, brownish, greenish color. I love that when you smile, that you smile wide, and I love that your torso has an arm on either side, because the things he kept saying were just so pathetically generic that I kept calling him on that. Like, you don't even care about me. You just use these same lines on everybody, blah, blah, blah. I see your game, boy. But oh my gosh, to his credit, Joe rolled with it. And what he came back with when I would say those things were witty and they were funny, and I truly enjoyed talking to him. But after a few days, Joe was getting really irritated that every time he'd make an advance at me, I was slapping it away, going, not in my house, buddy. And so he eventually tries to go peace out. You're just obviously not interested in talking to me, and I don't know why I bothered. I was just so attracted to you, and I thought maybe time would have healed some. All of this really stupid stuff to try and make up an excuse to leave. And instead of letting him go, I decided to call him out some more and to tell him that I would love to be his friend, but I wasn't going to bang him because I wasn't the same broken, insecure person that I was before. So if that's what he's looking for, he needs to move on to the next woman in his harem. And Joe got really offended that I said those things, and he even unfriended me, which I won't lie, I felt very hurt over that, even though I couldn't exactly explain why. But I said that I thought he was a bruh, one of those guys, fraternity kind of guys that just wants to go bang around. And he didn't like that, and he kept insisting that that's not not who he is anymore, and, you know, I'm being unkind to him, basically. So he gets frustrated. He's all like, goodbye then. And then he comes back a few hours later, messaging me again, trying to explain a lot of what had gone down between us before. And he was completely apologetic in a way that I found very disarming. He told me that none of what had happened was my fault, that I was pretty much perfect, and he had meant all the things he said back in 2006, but he just had so many mental health issues over his dad's death that he couldn't bring things together fast enough, basically. Like, he wanted those things, but he wasn't in a place to have those things. So he panicked and decided he was going to let me go and make me hate him because that's what was best for me. And I sensed some BS in there. You know, I felt like there was a little bit over inflation and exaggeration because, come on, you're going to tell me that you don't remember everything that happened 15 years ago, but you remember exactly what happened 15 years ago at the same time. But I grilled him with quite a few additional questions, some of which he was very clearly uncomfortable talking about, but he did answer everything I threw at him pretty much to my satisfaction. And Joe just kept apologizing and saying that he wanted to be part of my life. And he even said something to the effect of, I know my promises don't mean much, but I swear I'm not leaving again. I want to spend the rest of my life making things up to you. And at this point, I was not getting a sense that there was any push for a romantic relationship. And everything he said felt plausible enough to me that I wanted to believe it was true, so I did. I mean, I had been mad at him for years, but I feel like I'd gotten over it, you know? Like, what is the point of keeping this grudge and being like, no, I hate you, I can't even talk to you? Obviously, if somebody is going and looking up their exes on Facebook and trying to reach out to them, they're not in a very good place and they're probably pretty dang lonely. So I gave Joe a chance to keep talking to me and keep getting closer as a friend. And the more I did, the more Joe kind of started to try and turn it to a romantic thing. And I felt completely in control at first. You know, like I could shut Joe down at any time because I wasn't emotionally invested in this. It's not like I thought any of his flirtations were real or genuine. It's just how he communicates. And so the more we talk, the more Joe is coming up more and more telling me that he loves me, that I'm perfect, that I'm amazing. Would I please send him selfies to make his day brighter? All the right things that, again, I had not been getting from my now estranged husband for the last 15 years. And slowly, but also very quickly, Joe would add in commentary about wanting to marry me and have me move into his house. Obviously, I had already been down that road, so I wasn't trying to repeat my mistakes. And when he would bring those things up, I would constantly retort back with, well, what's different this time? And you wouldn't be there long enough for the ink to dry on my divorce papers. And, oh, if I got caught talking to you tomorrow, you'd just unsend all your messages and block me. You know, things that are very realistic and true possibilities. I even said many times to Joe that he likes to chase girls, but not to have them, or that he only wanted this fantasy world and not the reality and the hard work with it. And every time he swore up and down that that wasn't the case, that it was different now, that it was all real. And he even acknowledged the difficult work that would go into earning my trust and blending our families together. And I don't normally like to consider myself a codependent person. Like, I'm not trying to find a guy to solve all my problems and take care of me, but something about having these things reaffirmed over and over again, where I'm being told that Joe wants to take care of me, made me feel like I wanted to be this person worthy of being taken care of by this Prince Charming. Point blank, he even told me at one point that he is aware of what a bad, vulnerable position he put me in last time, so all I would have to do is say the word and he'd put my name on his bank account and credit cards so that I would have security. And he was just so persistent that he was committed to being with me, seriously and truly, that I could feel myself losing myself. And it's almost like I was standing right above my own body, watching it happen the entire time. So my defenses start to slip, even though I notice red flags left and right. For example, he says he's been separated from his wife for 4 years, but was getting the divorce finalized in 2 months, which that's a very odd time frame. Not that people don't get separated for long amounts of time and get divorced, but if you are meeting somebody and saying, well, I am not divorced yet, but in 2 months exactly, I'm going to be divorced, there's something about that does not quite have the ring of truth to it. And the more I kind of bought into everything, the more there were all these smaller things that Joe would do to chip away at what I was wanting for my own future. For example, at one point we had a very candid conversation about how bad my physical and mental health was after I had my last baby. And I explained that it was a really bad idea for me to try and have more kids because we were having, the children conversation. He has 3, I have 3. I say we're done. He said, I could do with some more. And so I explained that's not a good path for me. And he was fine with that at first. And he even apologized and said, well, he didn't mean to hint that we have to have a baby together. But then he started gently nudging about the baby issue like several times every day after that. And it was bizarre. And there was one point where we were chatting back and forth and I said, I just don't trust this. I feel like sooner or later you're going to up and leave. And he goes, well, this time I'll get you pregnant so that way we're stuck together forever. And I took that as, just kind of a flippant, sarcastic joke. But I showed my friend the screenshot and she was just hands down flipping out. And she's telling me this is a huge red flag. He's going to try and trap you so that you can never get away from him. You need to cut this off now, like block him now. But I was not in a place where I felt emotionally capable of just cutting him off cold turkey like that. But it did become a lot more noticeable when Joe would start bringing up the baby thing again and again, even to the point where he's telling me, oh man, I fantasize all the time about you being pregnant with my child. And I was like, why? And he says he didn't know, but that he thought it was sexy and sweet and stuff. And I'm like, that doesn't seem like a good reason to have a baby. And I know that that's a control tactic of a narcissist because it is so much harder to leave somebody if they've got their hooks in you with a baby for the next 18 years. That's the situation I was essentially looking to get out of with my estranged husband now. And I was especially alarmed by how similar that conversation of, let's get married and have babies was to conversations we had 15 years ago. When Joe convinced me that I need to leave my first husband for him because Joe loved me so much and we were meant to be and, we were going to have this life with these children and all these beautiful things designed and planned out already. Like, he was there, he was ready, he wanted it. My first husband did not. And I was ready to, go follow Joe down that rabbit hole. And then when I did, Joe didn't want me anymore. So as soon as I ran towards Joe for that promised life, thinking we were on the same page and just so compatible, it ended up being very fake. But even being aware of that and that Joe specifically had done that to me and that my second husband had trapped me with a baby, it got to the point very quickly that I went from saying no to another baby to, well, obviously we can't do that until we're both divorced, but it's an option on the table. Like, I don't even want another baby. I could sincerely die over it. But I was getting so sucked up into what Joe wanted and this life that he was painting for us that my brain was willing to negotiate that having another baby I did not want would be worth it to keep this connection with Joe going. So again, against my better judgment, against what I want for myself, I am getting so drawn in that I just want whatever he wants so that Joe will keep paying attention to me. And I saw every bit of this unfolding like a slow motion train wreck, but I did not care because I was being love bombed so hard. Now, love bombing is a common practice of a narcissist, and that's how they kind of sort out their prey. So they'll find somebody and start showering them with affection, attention, sometimes even gifts that do not make sense for the level of relationship that you're at, and they see how you react to it. Because a normal, healthy person looks at this rapid pace and backs away from the fantasy. So the narcissist knows that they need to move on from that person because they are healthy empty-minded and they're not going to return the love that is being showered upon them. You know, the healthy-brained person is going to see that there is nothing below the surface of that affection and run away, so it's too hard of a target for the narcissist to work for. And somebody returning that love that the narcissist is showering onto their victim is what the narcissist actually feeds off of. That's their ego boost. And I've met people who profess feelings for me way too quickly, or they said I intimidated them or whatever else, and it completely soured me to that guy to where I couldn't even talk to them again. So normally I recognize this tactic and back away like a mentally sound person. However, there is something very specific about Joe and our history together that pulls at me in a magnetic way that I do not understand at all. Suddenly, I go from being a strong, independent, capable woman to someone who has issues with codependency, which is where I feel like the guy's supposed to be my entire world, and I want him to love me and take care of me, and he's swearing he wants to do that so badly. And I already have an anxious, preoccupied attachment style, which makes me particularly vulnerable to love bombing. If you aren't familiar with anxious, preoccupied attachment style, it's one of 4 ways that people bond in relationships, and it stems from being very inconsistently nurtured in childhood. So, for example, one day as a baby, you cried and your mom picked you up and held you and did everything that you needed. And then another time you cried and she just totally ignored you and never came at all. So, as a baby, your entire survival is completely dependent on your parents. You literally cannot do anything for yourself. Yet you're being trained that your needs are going to be met almost randomly. So you become self-reliant in a lot of ways, but also very insecure and needy in relationships because you grew up in this constant pit of stress that you're going to be intermittently abandoned, and it might happen when you really need support the most. Which means, as an adult, you usually need a lot of reassurance to feel secure with your partner. So when somebody comes along and they get you kind of attached to them and then they stop responding to you or just totally cut you off completely, that psychologically triggers you on such a core level that you will do just about anything to get that validation back. It's basically like being crazy. So you might put on a bikini and walk past your guy and go, "I'm going to work," hoping he says, wait, you need to put some clothes on, sweetie. So that he has that jealous or concerned reaction, and your brain gets that reassurance that, okay, he still cares about me. You know, it seems manipulative, but it's a way to get something that you need at a very core level when maybe you don't know how to directly ask for it. And the anxious, preoccupied attachment style is also where you get so anxiety riddled over your partner that you can't focus on your work or anything else. And you might call or text 400 times in a row because you are so desperate for that validation that he's still there and he still cares about you. And if you are with somebody who withholds those kind of reassurances that you need, you get so overwhelmingly afraid and just buried in stress and anxiety because you're like, did he get sick of me? Is he seeing another girl? Did I mess everything up? And it tears you apart and brings you to such a physically painful place that existing without your partner actually hurts. It makes a relationship like a flat-out addiction, and it takes a lot of time for somebody to really feel calm and stable and safe in a relationship to where they don't need to be constantly reassured. And I'm not saying that that's a healthy way to be, because obviously it is not, but it is what it is, and it stems from childhood trauma and makes you very susceptible to being manipulated by people like narcissists. So enter love bombing, where somebody acts like they see you completely and they accept you and they love you and they want to support you either mentally, emotionally, financially, or all of the above. And it's like riding the biggest high you can imagine. Every dopamine center in your brain is just going off the charts until you feel insane levels of attachment to the person who is spoon feeding you all of this love. Your entire self-worth gets tied up into it, and you can end up going into this can't eat, can't sleep, reach for the stars level of love sickness, and it gets to the point where each text, each call is an endorphin rush to your system. In my case, I had my phone on vibrate, and just hearing it buzz and assuming that it was Joe on Messenger released a wave of relief through my entire body every single time. I mean, I've been excited to talk to people before, don't get me wrong, but I have never felt anything like that tension relief cycle ever. And I felt that so hard that I was standing there watching myself being conditioned to suit Joe's desires and not even fighting back anymore. If I played into his fantasies correctly, I would get these rushes of attention and compliments that just made my day. But if I brought up too many real-world issues, like logistically trying to make a home with 6 children work, he would back away and do very selective ghosting. If you're not aware of ghosting, that's where somebody up and vanishes, usually when you're in the middle of talking, and it leaves you with this very frustrated feeling because you were mid-conversation and they just left you hanging. Or maybe you said something very vulnerable and then the other party suddenly vanished, so now you're terrified that you've chased them off. Then, when the person finally returns, it's on to a new subject. So, ghosting is a form of punishment and behavior training where you learn very quickly that if you want the love rush, you play into what he wants. And it can feel really deceitfully like it's a normal give and take in a relationship because, you're getting that high from him and he's getting his high from you because both of you are behaving how the other one wants. However, it's a very imbalanced system and it's very hard to see that in the moments when it's happening. Because if Joe decides that I'm not playing the game right anymore, or if I challenge him in the wrong way, then he'll just pack up the game board and go home and you're sitting there horrified that you messed up. Like you have no power left. But Joe would ghost and then always return with an excuse that seemed very acceptable, and it made me feel unreasonable for feeling anxious. He'd say things like, "Oh, sorry, I had to get some training done for my new job," or "I've been having a birthday party for my son," and it made me feel like a time monopolizing brat that was trying to hold him hostage, because here I am getting upset when we're mid-conversation and he stops responding for hours. But here's the thing, I'm not crazy. If Joe had just said to me, "Hey, it's my son's birthday, so I'm going to be in touch with you later," then I would have known not to feel anxious and I would have had no reason to be afraid when he wasn't responding. However, Joe chose to leave me in that state of mind, letting me complain that he's running hot and cold instead of just explaining to me, "This is what my day looks like." And let me just clarify, in a normal relationship, yeah, people don't owe you an explanation if they're going to go shopping for a few hours. But the trick here is that sometimes Joe would explain that he was about to leave and other times he would just vanish. So it starts playing into that lottery system from being a baby, and sometimes you cry and mom shows up and sometimes she lets you scream and hurt until you pass out. It just triggers something very primal in you to where you can't think about anything else other than the person that you're waiting for. So flipping between fully communicating and going silent, then having an excuse for vanishing, it's a really subtle power move to make me seem like I'm being unreasonable when I complain about being ghosted. But after days and days of Joe swearing to me that he wasn't going anywhere, and even after telling him very directly that it terrifies me he's going to suddenly leave. So I need him to talk to me and not threaten me with bye forever when he gets mad. Don't go peace out, I'm going to block you. I told him that is very stressful and upsetting to me. And he said that he was sorry. He had said that before, that he had just gotten a little triggered and he understood what I was saying completely. And that's basically what he said every time I brought up an issue. It was always, "Oh, I am so sorry and I understand, so I'm gonna be better," basically. And then we came to what we'll call Monday night. So after being prodded and worn down and convinced that Joe was the one for me, that we had some special spark that no one else could ever have, which, seriously, I felt that myself very intensely and very deeply, so I believed that he was feeling it too. But now I kind of recognize that it was just an addiction response that I was having. Like, I don't do drugs, I don't smoke, I don't drink, but love is something that is very, very addictive for me because it's something I've never really had. But once I got like a million reassurances and truly believed that Joe and I were working to put our lives together over the next few years, like there were times where he was very much, I want to do this right now, and other times where he seemed very realistically like, yeah, we need to wait, we need to get our ducks in a row, and it felt authentic. Like the rush was kind of a dream and a hope, but we were actually doing the long-term plan. That's how I felt. And after Joe telling me a bajillion times that he was never going to leave me, that he wasn't going to let me push him away, that, you know, we're full throttle doing this, I gave in and decided to finally lean into the relationship all the way. Like, if this was all a fantasy, then I wanted to live in this pretend world with him, and if it was all real, I was willing to get divorced and come be his wife as soon as all the details were worked out with the timing. I mean, I was seriously emotionally there. I felt completely in love after less than 2 weeks of talking to him. And again, nobody else has ever had this kind of effect on me, so my defenses to combat Joe are really limited. But even letting myself get to that state of mind, it felt so odd. I knew that when I told Joe that I loved him too, I was doing it because I felt like that's what I had to do to keep his gaze on me. I felt like he was getting bored with trying to convince me, and he was slipping away to message me less and less. So I love you was what I had to say to keep that spark feeling going. It was not real for me when I said it. It was an addiction withdrawal kind of response, and I knew that. Yet, just a few days later, I was drinking that Kool-Aid and believing myself that I was deeply in love with Joe. And it's all because that's how strong the love bombing was for me. It filled every void that I had in my life. And just to illustrate how sad my personal life was, I actually told my still married husband that I was talking to Joe, and my husband knew exactly who that was. He knew our history together. He did not have a good opinion of this guy, and he still didn't care that we were talking. So there's no connection or reassurances or any kind of romance in my marriage whatsoever. We live very separate lives, and there have been a lot of issues with control and gaslighting and, you know, flat out fights if I gained any financial or physical independence from him. And that kind of unhealthiness is what left me very susceptible to Joe both times. I mean, my first husband and I were 19 when we got married, and it was a gunshot wedding that left both of us pretty miserable together. And I don't have any frame of reference for a healthy romantic relationship. So while that maybe doesn't make messaging Joe right to some of the people that are listening to me right now, I was just so mentally starving for affection that I was easy to talk into having an emotional affair because Joe is a person that feels like he's handing me everything that I ever wanted emotionally, and it came off as so effortless and all-consuming. Since recording this, I have come to learn that my second husband has been on dating sites behind my back for 6+ years. He did not care about Joe because he had a harem of women that he was also cycling through and sleeping with, and I had no idea. So I recant any guilt I expressed in this video. Anyways, I had asked Joe about meeting in person on Friday night when no one would be around to account for where I would be, and at first, Joe sort of jumped at the offer and said he'd come to my house, which is like 2 hours away from him, and he'd be there that evening when nobody was around. And when I said, no, we can't meet at my place, but since you are a single man with your own house, we can meet at your place. How does that work? And that's when his mask really started slipping. So after asking me over and over and over when we could actually see each other in person, because he just wanted to like hug me and give me a kiss and all this, like, yeah, right, like that's all he wants. I was just in shock when I asked him, you know, when and where are we going to meet? And he would not give me a firm answer. Suddenly he was like, well, I got to take my son to another county back to his mom's house, so I wouldn't be home until late that evening. And when I said, just let me know what works. I'm free the whole time. Just let me know. His response was, okay. Which obviously, okay, does not have any kind of enthusiastic tone to it. So I got really nervous and unsent my messages asking to meet, which upset Joe. Joe claimed that I was hurting him because I wasn't ready to see him after all, and I had to explain it to him 3 times that I did want to see him, but he was scaring me with his lack of interest in solidifying the plans. But somehow he did not seem to understand what I was trying to say at all, which of course raised some red flags that I promptly ignored. But somehow he didn't seem to understand me at all and just kept acting like I was the one making him feel rejected. And it broke down into this whole thing of me getting very upset and weepy and sending him pictures of me ugly crying, which was what he asked me to do. And then him reassuring me over and over again that he wasn't going anywhere ever. Basically saying, you can't mess this up. Nothing you do or say is going to mess this up. I'm here for you. I love you. This is permanent. So after having that very vulnerable bonding talk on Sunday night, Monday morning, I felt so good that I woke up with the intent to fully believe in Joe at this point. And so I was going all into this relationship without ever clapping back again that he wasn't going to stick around or that it was all just a game that he didn't really mean. I was just going to believe and hope for the best now because nothing else in my life had ever matched the intense feeling I was having by this point. And so to try to prove my newfound devotion, I gave Joe my full trust and my phone number and asked him to call me between 6 and 8 p.m. when I would be home alone. I was not expecting or demanding that he call me for the entire 2 hours, but somewhere in there, let's talk on the phone, let's be actual people. And Joe never actually said, yes, I'm going to call you, but he did play it up in a coy way that led me to believe he would be calling. I mean, these were set plans from my perspective. So around 5:40 p.m., I message him that everyone's out of the house now. No response. 10 minutes later, I nudge him again saying, this is the part where you're supposed to call me. No response. At 6:30, I tried to remain very calm and stated that I was fighting against my impulses to delete the messages with my phone number in it and just kind of run away at this point. And I said, I don't know if something came up for you. I'm trying to give him the benefit of the doubt at this point. So I don't know if you had something come up, but the radio silence is really making me feel awful. Again, the message is delivered, but not looked at. Then at 7:58 p.m., just 2 minutes before the time frame for me being home alone was ending, Joe pops back into Messenger and says, oh, sorry, fell asleep. And the convenience of that timing was just too much to try to ignore. I told him that I was very hurt, especially since I am just starting to really trust and believe in him. And Joe got annoyed with me, saying, well, he's been up since 3:30 a.m. So I responded and said, hey, I still have a few minutes before anybody's going to be home, so call me right now and we'll talk for that tiny bit of time. Oh, he couldn't do that because 2 of his kids were present. And I already knew before I asked him to call me, right now, that he was going to find a reason to say no, but I wanted to try and give him every chance to say yes, just so badly. I wanted him to prove me wrong. However, it was now impossible to ignore the glaring issue that was in front of us. His kids being in the house should not prevent him from making a 5-minute phone call if he's actually a single man. And I know he's not technically single until he's fully divorced, but if they are living in different locations like he says, then yeah, he's single. He's pretty free to do whatever he wants with other people at that point. But, even if your kids are there, make the call, show the effort, say, oh, I'm so sorry, let's set up another time to call. What time works? Something like that. Anything. Prove you're not lying about falling asleep and give me the reassurance that I need to keep the faith in this relationship. But he said no. And at this point, I'm so hurt that I'm asking him, why didn't you just tell me that you couldn't call? I waited for you. Because Joe had been consistently messaging me right up until I sent him the message saying everybody's gone at 5:40. So again, very selective ghosting. And then he suddenly ghosts me during the entire time that I'm free to talk on the phone. And Joe responded to that pretty hostilely, whereas every other time he was sort of like, oh, I'm sorry, I understand, we're gonna fix this or whatever. This time he's like, well, I thought I could get away, but I'm just too tired, and I should understand this because my kids are the reason we haven't been able to talk on the phone before, which is not accurate at all, but he can't do this with me right now, so just good night. And even feeling this hurt, like I am just coming to full grips that this is all a lie, everything's probably going to crumble apart now, I've seen the mask slip right off his face, and all of these very suspicious excuses are popping up that's making me think maybe he is not as single as he seems. I was still not trying to end the relationship. So instead of picking a fight or making it worse, I said, oh wow, sorry then, ... and just left it at that. Then he came back very quickly with an apology and an excuse that Joe was just so exhausted and he woke up to his kids going nuts and his son's mom is mad at him. So he didn't mean to snap at me. And it sounded, cordial and polite enough that I would have easily just accepted it to move on from the situation. But I did not want to risk kind of antagonizing the situation any further. So my plan was to just keep my mouth shut. In my head, he's apologized, so we'll talk tomorrow when we're both in better moods, whatever. Then a few minutes later, when I hadn't responded, I get another message that says, okay, followed pretty quickly by another that said, so that's it then. And I wasn't even looking at that as like a threat that he's saying, oh, so we're ending the relationship. I kind of felt like he was annoyed. So I, again, still trying to soothe this situation and make it, not escalate. I just said, I don't know what to say. And I was attempting to convey that, let's put a pin in this and we'll talk about it later. But all of a sudden I get back this response that's fine, to which I responded back with K, because, I'm getting irritated too at this point that he's acting like this instead of just letting us both calm down. And the next thing I knew, I was blocked, just totally cut off in the exact way that I begged him not to do to me. I had already explained to him days before that the bye forever card terrifies me and to just talk to me if he's upset. And he still just up and blocked me. I couldn't even reach out and say, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry, if I wanted to. So now I'm sitting there with my abandonment issues on full alert, and I am so sick over this that I can't eat or sleep for days. And the worst thing is, I went straight to my friends with the screenshots of those conversations, and I was the first one to say, I know I didn't do anything wrong, but it still hurt so much. For all the different ways that I had tried to push Joe away and test him, he did not falter one time. And even though I know that him blocking me was not my fault, but it was a punishment because I was asking for accountability, it still left me feeling like I had made a wrong move and caused this whole problem to happen. Maybe if I had said, I don't know what to say, but let's talk tomorrow, then he wouldn't have cut me off. And Joe had worked on me to convince me that he wasn't leaving, that he had always loved me, that what happened before was due to all of these personal issues from his dad's death, and that things were going to be different now, and he was free to do everything that he promised before. And here I am, alone, feeling stupid for falling into the exact same con again. But that's not the end of it. Because I have anxious, preoccupied attachment style with codependency issues in this situation, and because I had just been love bombed so hard for over a week until just all of my defenses were gone and I was emotionally raw and feeling in love, to where being cut off so abruptly quickly sent me into a literal state of withdrawal in my brain. Like, seriously, I felt like a drug addict needing a fix, and part of me wanted to go do or say anything to get Joe to come back and talk to me again. Let me fix this. Let me smooth this over. I'll even apologize if it makes you come back and give me a dose of affection. But because this had all happened before with him, I stopped myself from trying to make a move and decided to try and use these horrible feelings to learn about myself and why I felt this way. All the same though, if you haven't been in a love addiction withdrawal before, there is no misery quite like it. I was up for several nights just obsessing over what I was going to say if Joe unblocked me and came back. I was in my son's IEP meeting for school having intrusive thoughts about how I would give Joe another chance because I missed him so much. Heck, even my friend encouraged me to open up a dating profile to distract myself with some male attention, just to get over this horrible feeling faster. And every guy I looked at just disappointed me that it wasn't Joe. And every time I felt like I was mentally back in control of myself and these feelings were over, I would get this overwhelming rush and want him back so badly. And I recognized his lies. I saw the relationship as unhealthy and toxic. The cons definitely outweighed the pros for this guy by a lot. And I was completely aware of that. But that love bombing had impacted me in such a hardcore way that all I wanted was to be in that euphoric state of feeling cared about again. Even just from talking to Joe, just talking, I had so many symptoms of being lovesick, like clinically lovesick, that I physically felt destroyed because I couldn't be with him. And I lost 20 pounds in the time that we were talking. That's not normal. But his impact on me is so powerful, and I wish I could explain why he specifically does that to me when nobody else seems to be able to, but I have no idea why that is. But I do know exactly what Joe was doing to me. It's part of the narcissistic love cycle. First, they have to find somebody that they can idealize and pour all of this affection into to make that person feel special. And then that way you reciprocate those feelings back and they can feed their ego off of it. And if they think that you're really special, they might try to get you to marry them quickly or get you pregnant quickly. So that way you're kind of stuck when you realize you got sold a smoke and mirror show. But when you get nice and trapped and addicted to the narcissist's attention, they start to devalue you, which is where they start to punish you in very manipulative ways so that you automatically adjust yourself to suit what they want from you. So maybe they pick at your self-esteem or your friends until you just stop going out altogether. Or maybe they withhold affection if you don't say the things that they want you to say. And if you truly don't comply, then they either ghost you or they'll run hot and cold. And a lot of people don't even realize that they're being trained because it all happens so discreetly. There's usually some thin veil of an excuse to make it all seem okay in the moment. So you'll hear, "I can't stand to be away from you. Please don't go out to dinner with your friends." And so you end up staying home and you want to do it because you want to give your partner what they emotionally need. And that's especially true if you're somebody like me and you're very empathetic and very anxious, preoccupied attachment style, because you know what that feels like to have a need and not have it met. So you want to fix that for them. Or maybe you're being trained by being ghosted for hours and then he'll come back and be like, "Oh, sorry, I had to go to the store." And then you start to automatically feel crazy because, "Oh, I was worrying for nothing." And you don't quite put together that you should be saying, "Hey, wait, he told me the last 3 times that he had to go somewhere, so why didn't he just say he had to leave this time?" It's because he wants you to be insecure so that you'll be more compliant. And then when you aren't behaving or he gets bored or maybe the mask is slipped in a way that he can't recover from fast enough, you get discarded out of the blue like you never meant anything at all in the first place. And you're just left reeling with confusion and drowning in withdrawal symptoms. Like, what did I do? Why? Wait, no, don't take that away. Don't take my dopamine away. And that's where the apology cycle can make these kind of situations very hard to cut off. Because here's what tends to happen in a narcissistic relationship. You have been made to feel like you were perfect to this person. So if they discarded you, that means that you must have done something so unforgivably wrong. So you get all shaken up that this person who claimed to love you for days, weeks, months, whatever, has cut you off so coldly, like you didn't matter at all, and you still have all of these feelings going on because you probably got blocked off by the narcissist before you could process or resolve anything. And so you just got left to soak in that misery, which works great for a tactic called hoovering. So most people who idealize, devalue, and discard their partners are only sucking the life force out of a person. And so when that source of energy doesn't pay off anymore, or it's gotten too hard to drain anymore, the narcissist just moves on to the next person because all they care about is draining that energy source as much as possible. You know, that's the only way they know how to feel good. And that means it is really common that these type of guys keep this sort of harem of women that they cycle through. So if you're girl number one, you challenged him, so he shuts you off and moves on to girl number two. But if girl number two is already over his crap in another relationship, whatever, he'll move on to girl number three and so on and so forth until somebody gives him the payoff that he's looking for. But usually the narcissist will end up hoovering and rotate back to girl number one at some point because he knows that you have a bunch of unresolved feelings that he can now exploit. So he'll show up, apologize, maybe take full accountability for whatever happened, and that does two things for you. One, it makes you feel like he's empathizing with your feelings and he's changed, and that's not the case. He will never actually be remorseful and nothing is going to be different. It's just part of the game to get you hooked back in so he can feed off of you some more. Because if you're not full of feelings and wanting to play into his romantic relationship, you can't give him anything to feed his ego. So the more emotionally charged up you are, the more malleable you end up being. And two, you have now been trained that you have to approach this relationship with kid gloves on. What I mean is, by discarding you and coming back, you are 100% an addict that's getting another taste of your drug before you fully recovered. It's an addiction relapse to get you back in with the narcissist. And if you're not even aware that you're having withdrawal because of how the love bombing impacted your brain, then you feel like you genuinely love this person who left you, and you probably are going to hop back into a relationship with them hoping for it to be different this time. And it is different because now you know that your love supplier will cut you off without notice if you're not willing to walk the thin line that he sets for you. So any idea that this is going to be a better relationship now, or that he's going to change, or that you're going to stand your ground and be treated well, that is a complete delusion on your part. He doesn't care. Every time you don't play by his rules, he's going to cut you off again and cycle through his list of girls and then come back and apologize later because you've taught him that you'll put up with it. Once people show you who they are, believe them. Unfortunately, there is no easy solution to stop that withdrawal feeling because it gets under your skin until you feel like you might die because that love light is taken away and you just get spiraled into darkness. And don't forget, this happened while I was completely aware that this whole situation was a train wreck and I had done nothing to deserve being blocked. Now, just imagine how horrendous it was when I didn't have the understanding and self-awareness that I do today. I look at the spouse that I ended up with after the first time Joe discarded me, and it's no wonder that we have these insurmountable problems. I fell into the arms of another narcissist who love bombed me in a less intense way, granted, but he made me feel cared about after Joe tossed me aside and then leaned into my abandonment issues by walking me down the aisle and putting a baby in my belly, only to decide that he didn't really want that once reality set in. So yeah, I made bad choices and I'm not defending them, but I'm also still unraveling how messed up I am from childhood traumas that I didn't even know were affecting me. So there are a lot of layers of suffering that prompt me to make the unsound decisions that I keep making. I didn't understand that at all in my 20s. And sincerely, at the end of the day here, I trusted Joe for who he claimed to be. I was honest about everything. I was genuine. I fell in love. So it's on him, not me, if he was fake. All the same, though, I was educated. I saw every red flag, and I still ignored it because it just felt so good to be valued by Joe. I let myself get sucked into his fantasy deeper and deeper until we reached the discard phase of the relationship, and then he was gone without so much as a goodbye. It was, I love you, you're perfect, you make me so happy, I'm never leaving, and then fine, and blocked. He knew I saw his lies and that he couldn't immediately slap the blinders back onto my face, so he left for an easier target because he was never emotionally invested in me. I was food for his ego, but I am going to try to bounce back stronger and smarter and use this experience to heal some of the broken pathways in my brain. And again, I don't share this very hard personal story to try and make people say, oh, poor you, oh, you got treated so badly. I just really hope that other people in this situation can find this and maybe find a way to use this hurt for some good for themselves and know that they are not alone and they can try to channel this hurt into something different. It doesn't have to be the same. And if this just helped one person or saved one person from going back into an abusive relationship, then I don't care, ostracize me. I can take it.